Hi, and welcome to our first show, The Age Sage. My name is Kathy Lucas, and I'm the owner of Extended Family of Farmington Valley here in Simsbury. The Age Sage will be an exciting collection of ideas, learning, and fun, and it's dedicated to everyone out there who is planning to spend the rest of their lives at home. Evidence shows that in order for us to remain at home for the rest of our lives, there are 4 building blocks that we must work on. Let's call them the 4 cornerstones of prevention. The first cornerstone is strong living. So let me read a statistic for you. 1 out of 3 people over 65 suffer from some sort of fall each year. 30% of elderly falls result in serious hip or head injury. Of those seriously injured, 40% will be admitted to a long-term care facility, never to return to home again, and 25% will die within the year. Those are scary, scary statistics. But how do we work on this to prevent it from happening? Well, we must dedicate 30 minutes a day to exercise. I know you may have heard this before, but for us to stay strong and healthy for the rest of our lives, that is what we want to do. This should include aerobics, some sort of movement, walking, running, swimming, skiing, also some stretching and some weight training. So let's think of it as 30 minutes a day investment for the rest of our life. We'll have a guest on in a future show to talk about this in more detail. The second cornerstone is regarding medication management. Let me read another quote to you. 58% of older adults make errors on medication, which result in 3 out of 10 hospital admissions. 23% of nursing home admissions and up to 125 cardiovascular deaths each year are a result of medication errors. In a future show, we will discuss how to prevent this from happening, which is very important for all of us. Our third cornerstone is brain wellness. We hear a lot about that nowadays. 1 in 4 people, the scary, scary evidence has shown that people over 65 years of age have Alzheimer's disease, and the percentage dramatically increases with age. The disease affects up to 50% of the people over 85 years of age. In our upcoming shows, we will stay on top of the latest research in order to give you, 1, information regarding lifestyle choices positively impacting brain wellness, and number 2, information on memory-enhancing activities. So, let's stimulate your brain today. Here's a riddle for you. It's called the southbound train. There's an electric train traveling south. The wind is from the northwest. In which direction would the smoke from the train be blowing? Shall I read that one more time for you? There's an electric train traveling south. The wind is from the northwest. In which direction would the smoke from the train be blowing? So give that some thought, and if you think you know, there'll be a number at the end of the show that you can give a call to just to check and see if you're right. Hope that's fun for you to discuss. Our third cornerstone of prevention is hospital advocacy. Hospital infections are the 8th leading cause of death. So, delirium affects more than half of all elderly patients who are hospitalized or who undergo surgery. A recent study of 60 functionally independent individuals who are over 75 admitted to the hospital from their home for an acute illness, it showed that 75% were no longer independent upon discharge, including 15% who were discharged to a nursing home. We will explore in later shows how to choose your own personal hospital advocate. So, there is the general overview of our 4 cornerstones of prevention: strong living, medication management, brain wellness, and hospital advocacy. All of our shows will be chock full of information, and we'll have fun sharing it with you. Today, I've invited Marialta Sparagna, an elder care attorney in Simsbury, to join us to talk about advance directives. Marialta, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Kathy.
In this world, we hear so much legal terminology. I, for one, and I think a lot of us are having a lot of difficulty keeping them all straight. I was wondering if you could start off by telling us a little bit about what an advance directive is.
Well, there are several. The first one you might think about is called a living will. Mm-hmm. The second one is the appointment of a healthcare representative. And there's two other ancillary areas. One is organ donation, mm-hmm. and the other is the appointment of a conservator for your person if one should be needed.
Okay, so it sounds like we have a lot to discuss here. Tell me first what a living will is specifically.
Well, a living will is a document that goes into effect in a very, very narrow range of circumstances. And I don't want to misquote anything, so I am just going to read you the exact words of when it would go into effect. If your condition is deemed terminal, or if you're determined to be permanently unconscious, that you'll be allowed to die and not be kept alive through life support systems. Mm-hmm. Now, you need to have an irreversible or incurable medical condition for this to take effect. And the person who's going to basically decide that is going to be your treating physician. So this is not the case where you might be in a really short-term condition and just be unconscious. Mm-hmm. Basically, if you're expected to die within a very short period of time.
Okay, and so you write this will, and it talks about giving artificial respiration. Does it talk about feeding tubes? What kinds of things does this say that we can or we don't want to have?
Well, it's actually letting you predetermine what kind of treatments that you would either like mm-hmm. to have or not have. So really what you're doing is clarifying your choice. And the kinds of things that you would decide are, whether or not you would like artificial respiration, whether you'd like a gastric feeding tube, mm-hmm. A artificial tube for intravenous for water, mm-hmm. or and CPR. Cardiopulmonary resuscitation. Uh-huh.
So then we're talking about just the end of life. It's for elderly people, or is this something that would be appropriate for a younger person?
Any legal adult, anyone who's an adult mm-hmm. Can and probably should have one. The thing is, it's the kind of thing that you don't know if you'll need or not. Mm-hmm. It's a preventive.
Okay, so in case happens to be an automobile accident, and you're not expected to live, but what kind of precautions are taken to keep you alive for any particular length of time, that would address that.
That would address, if it was, again, it's a very narrow circumstance, because I think we're actually going to talk about a healthcare representative, mm-hmm. And that would be actually a decision maker. Okay. If it wasn't within those really tight circumstances, a persistent vegetative state, a coma, mm-hmm. and you really are at the end of life. You're not responding to stimuli. Again, it's a physician who's going to decide whether this is going to come into effect mm-hmm. if you have the document.
Okay. So speaking of, do you need to walk around with that document?
It's something that the people who are close to you should know mm-hmm. about. Your treating
okay.
physician should have it. If you're going into a hospital, or if you're in a nursing facility, or even if you're in assisted living, mm-hmm. someone should have a copy of that document so that they know.
So you talked about appointing a healthcare representative. Can you go into that a little bit for me? What would we use that person for?
Well, a healthcare representative is someone who is going to make a decision for you when you're unable to communicate for yourself. In terms of, what kind of treatment mm-hmm. would you have, or lack of treatment. So their decision is one that should be made not with your best interests in mind. It's a person who's going to decide what you would have decided for yourself. And that's the frame of mind that anyone that you would ask to be your healthcare representative should make those kinds of decisions.
Would typically people use their spouse as their health care?
Some people choose their spouse, and you also are provided space for a backup. So whether it be a child or a very dear friend, someone who knows you and would make the decision that you would make for yourself, depending on circumstances.
Great. And do they take care of letting you have, what about the pain medication? You might not want to have any extraordinary things done, but you probably want to have pain medication to make you comfortable.
In all cases, if you were talking about end of life, yes, pain medication is something that you are given. I mean, the point is to keep you comfortable, not in pain. I mean, unless you're specifically going to say, and let someone know in advance, write it down, I don't want any pain medication. No, pain medication care is included.
Okay, all right, good. And the next thing you talked about briefly was organ donation. I mean, I have to say that kind of makes me laugh because I have it on my license that I'm an organ donor, but I thought, well, who's going to want any pieces of me at this stage of the game? So why would you have to do more than put it on your license if you have it? And is there any purpose to someone my age and older having organ donation available?
Absolutely. You can use your license. Not everyone drives, so not everyone has a license.
Good,
you can use
good
an
point.
organ donor card. Also, on Connecticut's, they have basically forms for advanced care directives. You can specify any kind of parts that you would like to donate if you have specific parts, or tissue, or your entire cadaver. And there's many uses in medical science or dentistry. It's not necessarily age-related. So I think a lot of people think of organ donation is the donation of a viable organ that's going to be transplanted to someone. But there are, for research or medical student, I mean, there are so many other uses and ways to give, and some people choose to do it. I mean, I've had clients who had rare diseases and kindly donated their body for medical research. And,
so that's certainly something to think about then.
Absolutely. You can always be of use, I guess, is the
that's a very positive thing, very positive. What though, if I think it's a good idea now, but then, 5 years from now, I'm not so sure that I want to donate my body for research. Can this be revoked?
Absolutely. Everything's revocable. And if it's generally, a really simple rule to remember is if you've done it in writing, you need to revoke it in writing.
Okay.
And with in front of two witnesses is generally the best way to do it. So yes.
Great. Okay. And what was the next piece of the conservatorship? Tell me about what that is. That sounds like a very legal term. How will that affect us?
Well, a conservatorship, there are actually two types of conservators. One is conservator of your person, and one is conservator of the estate. The conservator of the estate is what you would think of as your financial, all of your finances. In other words, they would have to be appointed by the court, and they report to the court on the state of your finances, any money they would spend on behalf of your care. But what we're particularly concerned with today is conservator of the person. And the conservator of the person has a much broader role than just someone with an advanced, that would be your healthcare representative. In other words, they take care of your safety, they would help you decide where to live, and as well as all your medical needs.
It seems like we are entrusting a lot into this individual that kind of makes me nervous that to hand it over to someone. When would you need that kind of care from some outside person?
Generally, if you are incompetent, and it's not simple, nor is it lightly done. I mean, you have to go to court. It's a decision made by a probate judge. There is an examination by a physician who determines whether or not they feel that you're incompetent. You are a lawyer, you are absolutely entitled to legal counsel. So a lawyer is appointed to represent you. And in many cases, some people voluntarily decide that, they don't think they can handle their affairs any longer. In some cases, they have a diagnosis, such as Alzheimer's, which, might indicate that they won't be able to do it.
I see.
So
yes.
what you're allowed to do is pre-appoint one should one be necessary. Again, it's you have a will to decide what's going to happen to your things, your physical items after death. This is kind of ensuring what's going to happen to your body or your person, to have someone to make decisions for you. And the law allows you to kind of plan. So it's something you might want to take advantage of.
I kind of like that idea because a will, that's after you're gone.
Right. Your
So,
stuff.
Yeah, your stuff. And the rest of this all has to do with the quality of life that we decide ahead of time we want to have, not somebody else deciding that for us at that point. So I kind of like that idea. Do you go to an attorney to get all of these documents done?
You can, and I normally do it is if I'm drafting a will for someone or we're doing a power of attorney. We usually have the discussion. I'll say, well, okay, now we're taking care of your physical possessions. What about thinking about these, very important issues that might arise?
Yeah.
And so I always bring it up then. But you can also go onto the Secretary of State website. There are some advanced directive forms on there that you can print out, and you would want to do it in front of witnesses. And if you had a notary public, there's also an additional form on the website that you can use.
Okay. Why don't we put that up at the end of the show, too, as an address for people to look on their computer and find that information and review some of this information that we're giving out to them today. You mentioned briefly the notary public, but I don't see how they're hooked into the rest of the advanced directives that we were talking about. What is the difference between a notary public who might handle your finances and what you do with your healthcare representative or your conservator?
Well, their function, a notary, is basically just attesting to the fact that they have seen these witnesses sign your document. That's really their function.
Okay.
So they're not actually given any decision-making authority. They're basically there to assist in the witnessing
of
the document.
So that's very little control. Whereas I had always thought that, well, if you've got a power of attorney, that they would take care of all these things that you're talking about, but actually that's not the case at all.
Well, if you're talking about a typical power of attorney, which is what most people would think of, is the ability to handle your finances. Powers of attorney can be as broad or as narrow as the person would like. There are some that are really popularly used, very limited use. For example, if you can't attend your real estate closing, then you might have a power of attorney.
I see.
Just limited to that specific purpose. There is something called a durable power of attorney, and a statutory form for that as well, which gives the person very broad authority to basically act as your agent in any banking transaction, financial transaction. There's a long list of things that they're able to do for your benefit.
Why would it be better to use an advanced directive rather than a notary public?
Well, we wouldn't be using a notary public. We're talking about, I think,
a power of attorney, sorry.
A power of attorney, we're talking about two different things. Again, the law looks at a person really in two distinct ways. One is your physical body, and that's your person, and that would include the safety of your body, your medical treatment, where you live, and your finances. And so they're divided into two very different functions. You can have one person, your power of attorney, take care of your finances, and maybe that person isn't the type of person who could, make the kinds of medical decisions that might have to be made. So you could appoint someone else as your healthcare representative. They used to call it a healthcare power of attorney, but they've actually gotten away from that language.
I see. Okay. All right, great.
One thing I'd like to bring up is in October 1st of 2006, the state of Connecticut actually introduced the healthcare agent and redid all of their advanced care directives and put those forms out so that people could use them. But if you have a living will that's prior to that, it does not mean that it's invalid. It's still good.
Okay. So the living will would still be good, but you
Yes.
could make these additions to it that you spoke of.
The new forms, I think, give you a little more flexibility. There's room for you to write in specific things that you would want. If you go to an attorney, they're going to draft, just draft it for you.
And we should keep all of these forms in a safe deposit box. Everybody should be aware of who is doing what, your doctor, the people that you've chosen. And does anybody need to have proof with them when they're going to be making healthcare decisions for you or taking over the financial piece of running your financial business? Do you need to have that document with you when you're talking to the banks and attorneys?
You will definitely need an original if you're going to walk into a bank.
Okay.
And many times they would like a recent power of attorney. So sometimes banks put their own parameters in terms of time frame. Oh, well, we'd like to see one that's less than a year old or within the last 6 months or something. In terms of your healthcare power of attorney, your treating physician should definitely have one. If you're going to the hospital, if you're in a nursing home, that should be on file with your records. If you're, luckily at home and whatever, just make sure that someone else knows about it. Your healthcare agent, for example, or your healthcare representative should know, and perhaps you want to give them a copy.
So it sounds to me as if we ought to get this done now, no matter what age we're at. So all of that's taken care of instead of taking any chances that we're unable to make those choices of appointment and decisions about our health and our well-being and where we want to be taken care of ahead of time, when we can make the decision.
Well, I think so. It's, you may never need it, but it's something that's good to have, and you may save your loved ones some agonizing decisions. A living will, for example, speaks for you when you cannot. And so if you're ever in a circumstance such as, many people are familiar with the Terry Schiavo case. To have a document such as that is really valuable.
True.
And if you appoint a healthcare representative for yourself, and you talk to someone, and you tell them, look, this is what I would like for myself, this is what I wouldn't like for myself, and you're entrusting them to make the decision that you would make for yourself, not what's in your best interests. I think it's better for you, and if that person that you were thinking of appointing can't do it, don't you think it's better that you know that they don't think they're capable of making those types of decisions ahead of time rather than maybe burdening them?
That's true. Well, this has been so enlightening, Marialta, and I can't wait to kind of work on this stuff myself with my husband and get a lot of it accomplished and done. You do your will and you think, well, you're all set, but more and more people are coming across incidences with their parents where we don't have all the documentation, and it's a burden on the families to have to make those decisions for you, So thank you very much for coming today. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
And I wanted to tell you and our audience that the rest of our shows will have all kinds of information that's going to be fun for you. We have Mr. Handyman, Ron Lecandro, coming on one of our shows to talk about making your home really safe so that you can not trip and fall and have to end up in the hospital. Making it easy for you to get in and out of the house and looking at things just to make your life easier. We'll have people coming in who are going to be talking about all kinds of exercise programs for ourselves. We'll have people talking about medication management. We also have people coming in to talk about forgiveness, because it's also important for us to feel comfortable within ourselves inside as well as taking care of our outside beings. So I want to thank you all for joining me and Marialta today, and hope that you do see us again next month. Thank you.
There's a place where a total stranger will give their blood to save your life. There's a place where someone you never knew will save your child from drowning. A place where people will give you food and shelter after a flood. There's a place where, when you need it most, someone will reach out their hand, put it across your shoulder and say, "Everything's going to be okay." That place is called America, where we look out for each other. And it's up to us to keep it that way. When you help the American Red Cross, you help America.
Some things require experts at every stage.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Others are more just a matter of taste and preference.
Just the way I like them.
Buying a home falls somewhere in between. That's why you should visit HomeLoanLearningCenter.com for expert guidance. A website where you can learn just how you should go about buying a home. You'll get facts, tools, and impartial advice. From seeing a lender to settlement and beyond, there's a step-by-step explanation of the process. All at HomeLoanLearningCenter.com.
Houston, we have a solution.
Think of it as mission control for buying a home. That's HomeLoanLearningCenter.com.
Living with diabetes is the pits.
When I wake up, the first thing I have to do is check my blood sugar.
I just want to feel like all the other kids without pricking my fingers or injecting myself with insulin.
Diabetes is rough on my whole family.
When I was diagnosed, my mom couldn't stop crying. But imagine a cure.
Right now, as many as 3 million children and adults are living with type 1 diabetes. They will never outgrow it. Some will face complications like kidney failure, blindness, and heart disease. That's why the science the Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation is supporting is so critical. Imagine a cure.
There are moments in your life when you think about what defines you. Mine was the moment when the doctor said autism.
What do you do next? There is no cure. There is no game plan.
Can you tell me what I'm doing is what I'm supposed to be doing? Because I don't know.
As a parent, you're expected to have all the answers. But when your child has autism, there are very few answers to be had. That's why tens of thousands of parents across the country have come together online to give researchers the insight they need. It's called the Ian Project.
Every child is different, and unless we, as parents, tell the researchers what is specific to our child, how will they know? They don't live with the children. They don't see them every day.
This is one thing that I can contribute. I can contribute to the answer.
Join the Ian Project. We all have questions. Together, we'll find the answers.
Funding for Simsbury Community Television is provided in part by contributions from viewers like you. Thank you.